Montana, 1878. The wind cut low across the prairie, brittle and sharp, like a whisper holding secrets of snow yet to come. Annie rode slowly, the silence of the plains heavy around her, only the soft creak of saddle leather breaking the emptiness. Dust stirred beneath her horse's hooves, trailing behind her like fading hope. Inside the worn folds of her dress was a letter, ink-smudged and edges frayed, a marriage proposal from a man she'd never seen, Walter Collar. Wealthy, steady, promising stability her uncle had assured her was a blessing. Annie didn't feel blessed. She felt cornered. She reached Dead River as evening fell, the sky bruised with twilight. Buildings leaned into each other, shadows stretching long and dark, the town quiet, watchful. She dismounted carefully, feeling the ache settle deep into her bones. Eyes followed her, but gave no welcome. The saloon's door creaked as she pushed inside. The bartender glanced up, indifferent. "I'm looking for Mr. Walter Collar," she said, voice dry from dust and quiet desperation. Silence fell. A thin, wiry man in the corner snorted softly. "Walter? He's dead. Been 2 months now." His eyes glittered, mocking. "Guess no one bothered to tell you." Annie's fingers tightened on the worn wood of the bar. She felt hollow, as if she'd just lost something she'd never even had. And his family? "One brother," the bartender answered slowly, wiping a glass, not meeting her eyes. "Warren. Lives out at what's left of Green Hollow Ranch." Outside, Annie leaned against the rail, breath tight in her chest. She had crossed miles, left everything behind, and found only loss waiting for her. That night, the innkeeper's wife turned her away, polite but firm. She ended up in the stable at the edge of town, curled on rough straw, trying not to cry. Just as sleep claimed her, a soft creak startled her awake. The barn door moved slightly. Her fingers found the knife in her boot. A figure stepped silently into the dim moonlight. A man. He placed something on the floor, a blanket and a warm tin, then vanished without a word. Annie stayed still a long moment, heart pounding. When silence returned, she reached forward slowly, touching the gift. Beans, still warm. She held them against her chest, feeling the warmth seep into her, a quiet comfort in the loneliness. She didn't know Walter Collar, the man she was meant to marry, but someone else had found her first, leaving kindness without words or demands. Chapter 2. Morning came quietly, pale and brittle, the frost leaving thin traces along the barn walls. Annie woke slowly, wrapped tightly in the borrowed blanket, the empty tin still beside her. She folded the blanket carefully, placing it neatly by the barn door. It felt important somehow, a small gesture of gratitude to whoever had shown her kindness. The town looked no friendlier in daylight. People passed her without acknowledgement, their eyes averted, as if her presence might stain them. Only one child, no older than 12, finally responded to her question about directions. He pointed vaguely toward the distant hills. "Green Hollow Ranch. Just follow the old road till you see the broken windmill." Annie nodded her thanks, mounting her horse once more, feeling the stiffness in her bones with each slow stride of her mare. The landscape stretched on, empty and vast, making her small and insignificant. By mid-afternoon, the broken windmill appeared, standing crooked against the sky like a skeleton abandoned to weather and time. Beyond it lay a modest cabin, stark and isolated. As she drew near, the door creaked softly, caught in the afternoon breeze. Inside, the room was sparse but warm, a low fire smoldering gently. A man sat by the fire, sharpening a blade, his movements steady, careful. He looked up slowly, eyes calm, steady, like the blade he held. "You left food last night," Annie said softly, stepping cautiously inside. "You needed it," he replied simply, placing the knife aside. "My name's Warren." Annie hesitated, then offered her own. "Annie, I was supposed to marry your brother." Warren's face showed no surprise, only quiet acknowledgement. "Walter's gone," he said, voice low, weighted. "Left this behind." Annie stood awkwardly, uncertainty pressing on her chest. "I didn't know. No one told me." "People here keep their silences," Warren replied quietly, motioning toward a chair. "Sit. Eat." He handed her a bowl of stew, warm and rich. Annie ate slowly, comforted by the warmth and the quiet. Warren didn't speak again, but the silence wasn't heavy. It was shared, easy. That night, she slept in a real bed for the first time in days. Blankets piled thick, the room quiet, the fire's low crackle a gentle reassurance. For the first time in weeks, Annie felt the tense knot within her slowly loosen. Chapter 3. Days settled into quiet rhythms, each morning breaking pale and still, the prairie stretching endlessly outside. Annie found small tasks to occupy herself, mending clothes, sweeping floors, cooking meals from whatever she could find. Warren spoke little, his silence filling the cabin like shadows, comfortable yet heavy. One afternoon, while Warren was tending the distant fences, Annie carefully opened a trunk in the corner, half hidden beneath a faded quilt. Inside were letters, old and worn, wrapped neatly with a ribbon frayed from age. She held them gently, feeling like an intruder, yet unable to stop herself. Walter's handwriting covered the pages, steady and sure, describing dreams, land, and hope. "You shouldn't read those," Warren's voice startled her, calm but firm from the doorway. Annie dropped the letters, turning quickly. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean. I just wanted to understand." His eyes softened, the brief flash of anger fading. He had dreams bigger than this place, bigger than me. Annie picked up the letters carefully, placing them back inside. What happened to him? Warren stepped inside slowly, shoulders heavy. Lightning. Fire took the barn, spread faster than we could fight. I tried. "I'm sorry," Annie whispered, words small and insufficient. He shook his head softly. "You don't need to be." That night, Warren built the fire higher than usual, flames pushing back the darkness. Annie sat quietly across from him, stitching a tear in one of his shirts. Their silence had changed, softened by shared secrets, the loss and understanding binding them closer than words could. Chapter 4. Spring unfolded slowly, hesitant and fragile, brushing warmth and green over Annie and Warren's quiet existence. The prairie around Green Hollow began to breathe again, the earth thawing, yielding soft grasses and the gentle hum of returning bees. Annie rose early each day, stepping outside with bare feet into the cool morning dew, eyes lifted to the horizon, as if expecting something just beyond sight. Warren never questioned her silences. He worked alongside her, mending fences, planting seeds in newly turned soil. Their rhythm matched effortlessly, wordless yet full. Each shared task brought them closer, weaving a quiet bond forged from mutual respect and understanding of survival. One day, as Annie gathered wood near the edge of the orchard, she found a bird, small and shivering, its wing twisted awkwardly. She cradled it gently, feeling its tiny heart beat fiercely against her fingers. Warren watched from the cabin doorway, eyes gentle, patient. "Think it'll live?" he asked softly. "I don't know," Annie said quietly, smoothing its feathers carefully. "But I have to try." She cared for the bird diligently, offering breadcrumbs soaked in water, building it a safe haven inside an old box. Warren watched her without comment, seeing the tenderness in her actions, the quiet determination that defined her. Each day the bird grew stronger, and each day Annie seemed lighter, her eyes clearer. Weeks passed, and one morning Annie found the box empty. She looked upward, eyes searching, until she spotted the bird perched high in the rafters, wings spread tentatively, ready to fly. She smiled, genuine and bright, a moment of quiet victory that Warren held close. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of gold and lavender, Annie joined Warren by the fence, standing quietly beside him. She leaned gently against the rail, her shoulder brushing his lightly. "It's coming back," she said softly, eyes on the distant hills. "This land, this life, it feels like something worth holding on to." Warren looked at her, quiet acknowledgment in his gaze. "You fought for it," he said, voice steady and sure. "It's yours." She turned to him, eyes warm with gratitude and trust. "Not just mine, ours." He nodded once, the silence between them rich and deep, filled with unspoken promises and shared hope. For the first time in many years, neither felt alone. Chapter 5. Summer crept in without ceremony. The wind lost its bite, trading sharpness for heat, and the hills near Green Hollow turned gold beneath the sun. Grasshoppers clicked through the high stalks, and dust hung in the air like a veil that refused to lift. Annie rose earlier each day, shoulders browned from light, hands raw from work. She had stopped counting mornings. The fences were nearly mended, and a second row of seedlings had taken root in the narrow patch behind the cabin. The rhythm of the land shaped her more than any plan. She no longer reached for her old dresses in the trunk. Just the worn blouse, the boots that fit like second skin, and a sun-bleached hat Warren had left on a peg without comment. She wore it now without asking. Warren spoke little still, but his silences had changed again. There was weight to them now, not coldness. One evening they sat side by side on the porch as the light burned orange across the grass. Warren passed her a tin mug, warm cider pressed from the last of last year's apples. "You ever think of leaving?" she asked, not turning her head. He didn't answer at first, just watched the horizon where the sun was bleeding into the hills. Then, "Used to, not lately." She nodded. The mug was warm in her palms, the silence around them steady and kind. Far off, a coyote called once, then fell quiet. Later that week, Annie found a shirt on the clothesline that wasn't hers. It was Warren's, clean, mended where the shoulder had split. Her own stitching months ago. He'd never mentioned it, but he'd kept it. That night, she set 2 plates without thinking. He didn't object. They ate together as the fire dimmed low. Afterward, he stayed a little longer than usual, watching the embers with an unreadable look. When he finally rose, he placed a hand gently against the doorframe, steadying himself. "Storm coming," he murmured. Annie glanced toward the sky, clear as glass. But she didn't argue. She just nodded and added another log to the fire. By morning, the wind had changed. And so had she. Chapter 6. 2 days later, the sky darkened with distant clouds, heavy and sullen, gathering at the horizon like bruises. Annie stood by the fence, her fingers tight around the splintered rail, watching the prairie bend and ripple under the first gusts of wind. Birds scattered from the high grass, rising in quick flutters, vanishing into safer skies. Warren worked quietly, securing loose boards and tightening ropes. They didn't exchange many words. Their communication had settled into gestures, looks, and quiet movements. By late afternoon, everything was secured, shutters locked, firewood stacked inside. That evening, as dusk deepened into a shadowy gloom, Annie set the table methodically. 2 plates, 2 cups, spoons laid out neatly. Warren noticed, pausing briefly in the doorway, but said nothing. He took his place, and they ate in silence, the meal simple but warm. Afterwards, Warren rose, reaching for his coat. Annie looked up quickly, her voice quiet but firm. "Stay." He hesitated, coat in hand, eyes searching her face. Finally, he nodded, hung the coat back up, and moved toward the fire, settling into his chair. They sat together, the wind picking up strength outside, whistling softly around the cabin, testing its edges. Annie found herself studying Warren as the flames painted shadows across his face, the steady eyes, the quiet strength in the curve of his shoulders. The storm outside became a gentle backdrop rather than a threat, underscoring the stillness within. Late in the night, when the wind quieted into a whisper, Annie stepped outside. The sky stretched clear and dark, speckled with stars. She breathed deeply, feeling the fresh calm settle into her bones. Something had shifted, gently but surely, not in the world around her, but within her own heart. Chapter 7. The days that followed slipped by without names. Morning bled into dusk in soft gradients, and the chores of the land pulled at Annie's hands like familiar threads. She moved through each task with calm precision, hauling water, scraping ash from the hearth, turning the soil near the fence line where a second row of beans had begun to rise. Warren stayed near, but never too close. He fixed the porch rail one afternoon while she shelled peas on the steps. Neither spoke. But when a board split under his weight, she looked up, and their eyes met. Not startled, not searching, just meeting, like a pause in a sentence. Later that evening, she found her old boots by the fire. Cleaned, restitched at the heel. She hadn't asked, and he hadn't told her. The quiet between them had thickened, not with tension, but with something unspoken and necessary. Like the silence of a barn before morning, when the animals stir but haven't made a sound. One night, after supper, Warren placed a small wooden box on the table. "From Walter," he said simply, then turned away. Annie waited until the door clicked behind him. The box was worn smooth, the edges rounded by years of handling. Inside were papers, old deeds, a yellowed photograph, and a folded scrap of fabric with her name stitched in a careful, unfamiliar hand. She stared at it, her thumb brushing the thread. Walter's doing, perhaps, or someone else who'd once imagined a future. She tucked the box under her bed, said nothing. That week, the first wildflowers appeared along the fence line. Small, stubborn things that pushed through the hardpan with colors the wind couldn't carry away. Annie paused to kneel by one, fingers brushing its petals. Behind her, Warren watched. He didn't speak. But for the first time, when she rose, he walked beside her back to the house. And when they reached the door, he didn't go in first. He waited. The first stranger came at dusk. Annie heard the hooves before she saw the rider. Slow, deliberate, one after the other, like someone counting time. She stepped onto the porch, rag still in her hand, breath held. Warren was already by the edge of the orchard, his axe resting low, shoulders stiff. The man didn't dismount, just tipped his hat. "Lookin' for supplies," he said. "Heard the ranch might still be standin'." His eyes flicked to Annie, then back to Warren. There was nothing friendly in the way he looked. Warren didn't answer, didn't nod, just stared. The rider cleared his throat, then turned and rode off, back toward the hills, dust curling behind him like smoke. They didn't speak of it that night, but Annie noticed Warren double-checking the door latch before bed. And in the morning, the rifle was no longer above the hearth. It was by the door. Days passed. Annie tried to ignore the tension tightening around the house like a belt drawn slow. But it was there, in the way Warren walked the fence line twice instead of once, in the way he paused just slightly when chopping wood, as if listening for something that hadn't happened yet. One afternoon, she found footprints behind the shed. Not his, not hers. Too wide for her, too heavy for him. She brushed them away without a word. But that night she bolted the window in her room for the first time. Then came the envelope. Left on the porch, no knock, no sound. Just there, resting on the rail in the rain. Inside, no words, just a single strip of cloth, red and torn, knotted at one end. Annie stared at it, not understanding. Warren understood. His face went hard in the firelight when she handed it to him. He didn't explain, but he packed a small bag that night and left it by the door. "You leaving?" she asked. He shook his head. "Not yet." That night, Annie didn't sleep. She lay still, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind shift. At some point, Warren's footsteps passed her door and didn't return. Chapter 9. The next morning came gray and heavy, a sky that pressed low against the hills. Annie stepped outside with a bucket in hand and found hoofprints near the well, fresh, deep, circling once before vanishing toward the trees. Whoever had come had watched and left nothing behind. Warren was gone. Not the gone of leaving, a different kind. His coat still hung by the door, his rifle was in its place. But his boots were missing, and the bag he'd packed 2 nights ago was no longer by the wall. She waited until noon before saddling her mare. The trail led north, faint, almost guessed at more than seen. Twigs bent, grass pressed down where his weight had passed. She rode slow, careful. No one had taught her to track, but something inside her had learned anyway. Not from books, not from words, from watching, from listening. 2 hours out, she found the fire. Dead now, but the stones were still warm. Ash scattered in a pattern that felt recent. And next to it, tucked into a hollow of roots, Warren's hat. Not dropped, not lost, left. She didn't take it, just stared. The sun had begun to break through the clouds, weak and thin. Then a branch snapped behind her. Annie turned fast, too fast. A man stood there, maybe 30 paces off, rifle lowered but not slung. Not hostile, not friendly, just watching. "You should head back," he said flatly. "Ain't your place." She didn't answer. "You don't know who he is," the man added, quieter. Annie's hands tightened around the reins. "I know enough." He shook his head. "No, you know what he let you." Then he walked away, down the ridge, slow, as if sure she wouldn't follow. And he was right, she didn't. She turned her horse homeward, but the air felt different now, the land thinner, the quiet meaner. When she reached the cabin, there was a letter nailed to the door. Chapter 10. The letter was nailed high, just above the latch. The paper was thick, torn from ledger stock, the handwriting tight and precise. Too neat for a threat, too cold for a warning. "We know. He owes. Don't make it yours." No signature, no seal. Annie read it once, then again. The wind caught the edge, fluttering it like a flag. She didn't take it down. Inside, she lit the fire with shaking hands. The warmth didn't reach her. By nightfall, Warren still hadn't returned. She stayed up, lantern low, rocking slightly in the old chair near the hearth. The quilt across her lap was the one she'd mended months ago. His coat was still by the door. His hat wasn't. When the knock came, it was soft, barely more than a tap. She didn't breathe. The door creaked open. It wasn't Warren. The man who stepped inside had a scar down his jaw and a revolver holstered wrong, low, cross-body. His eyes scanned the room, not nervous, just bored. "You're Annie," he said flatly. Not a question. She didn't answer. He walked past her like he belonged there, picked up the kettle, sniffed it, set it down. He won't come back, you know. Men like him run twice, first from war, then from what they did in peace. Still, she said nothing. He turned toward her, slower now, studying. "But you're still here, which means either you're stubborn or you're stupid. Or maybe you think you matter to him." Annie stood. Her knees didn't shake. "Leave." He smiled then. Not wide, just enough to show he liked being told no. "He left you," he said, "like he left the rest of them, like he left the boy in Tucson." That stopped her. Just a breath. Just a blink. He saw it, and that was enough. He tipped his hat, muck polite. "Don't say I didn't try." And then he was gone. She bolted the door after him, heart hammering. Warren hadn't told her everything, but now she knew. Someone else would. Chapter 11. Sunday rose brittle and clear. Annie dressed with slow hands, the same boots, the same plain dress she wore when she first arrived. At her side, tucked into a stitched pocket, was the small carving he had once left for her. She walked to town. Dead River watched her pass like it always had, silent, narrowing its eyes, weighing her against something she never agreed to carry. Church bells rang once. She entered late, sat in the back, alone, but her spine stayed straight. When the sermon ended, the air inside held its breath. She stepped outside into the sun, and they were waiting, the two women from the store, the boy with the mocking walk, the sheriff's eyes somewhere at the edge of the street. And then, whose? Dust rose slow behind one rider. No rush, no bravado. Warren. He dismounted without flourish, carried no rifle, only a letter, worn, familiar. He stopped beside her and placed it in her hand, the same one she'd once written, unanswered. Then he turned to the crowd. "I owe no one but her." Simple, final. Murmurs rippled like dry leaves, but no one stepped forward. Annie didn't speak. She just stood beside him, not behind, not beneath. Beside. That night, back at the cabin, she set 2 plates again, and when they ate, it wasn't to fill silence. It was to stay. Friends, if this story sat quietly in your chest the way the wind holds a field, leave something behind for us. A like, a comment, a small sign that you rode this trail with us. Because life, like the plains, can be harsh. But even in the loneliest places, something can bloom. If you're willing to stay long enough to hear it. Until next time.